Hello everybody, we're going to be working on the Unit 5 assignment today called the Apollo launch page. And once again, so I start this recording, this is really kind of a fumble here. I really need to update that. It should say Prometheus launch page. So I'm going to pause for a moment and fix that. All right. Okay, so I went ahead and I fixed the title here. So this is the Prometheus launch page. And just to do a really quick explanation here, prior to Prometheus, our web server on campus was called Apollo. Apollo is still up and running, and we still use it as a backup, but we use it for mostly utility purposes and for students' portfolios, which kind of leads really kind of nicely to this. Prometheus is our current server on campus that we push all of our new students to. It operates as a virtual machine on top of a VMware host out at the IMET campus, if you're really curious about all the specifics of it. It runs on top of an operating system called Ubuntu. If you've never heard of that, Ubuntu is a variant of Linux. In fact, you could Google that if you're curious. Oh, a little too many N's there. All right, so you can Google Ubuntu. Yeah, I always have to set these things. Sorry. But Ubuntu is a really super popular distribution of Linux. And if you're not sure what Linux is an operating system that is open source and is built on top of the original Unix operating system. But because it's open source, you don't have to pay for it, basically. Ubuntu is probably the most popular distribution of Linux. It has both desktop versions and server versions, and we are running a server version to run our web server called Prometheus. But Ubuntu is one of those operating systems that, if you're really curious, you can run as a virtual machine, or you can actually load it onto your computer as the primary operating system, and lots of people do that. So I do get students once in a while, not super often, like kind of like 1 out of 50 or something, that will use Linux as their primary operating system. So not the Mac, not Windows, but Linux. And Ubuntu is probably one of the better distributions because it has built into it all the things that you expect from an operating system, like a web browser, multimedia tools, an office suite, coding tools, etc. And just kind of pointing out, because I think that's kind of interesting to know what operating system we're working on. But we are working on Ubuntu. Now, Ubuntu, just being an operating system, in order for it to become a web server, you have to load up what we call web server software, which then creates this construct out online we call Prometheus. When we set you up with accounts on Prometheus, you're kind of like one of your primary ways to connect to that account is through FileZilla. So for example, here's me connecting to one of my accounts on Prometheus. Let's see if I can get my password right first. There we go. And when you have your host typed in, your username and your password, and then you hit the connect button, it will go ahead and connect up to Prometheus, and then it creates this kind of like this dual screen view that basically establishes this right side of your screen as your account on Prometheus, so your file and folder view on Prometheus in the home directory. And then on the left side of the screen is your local file system on the current computer that you're using. This is a tool that, as you guys have already learned, where we use to, once we've created a website on our local machine, we can then upload it to Prometheus. And then once it's placed on a folder on the right-hand side here, then all it takes is basically getting the right file and folder structure set in place in order to be able to access that stuff, right? So this becomes kind of a little bit of a challenge, and here's what most of you will face as a challenge. Now, Vidal, you were in the session with me the other day, so I might pick on you a little bit, but I was working with one of our students, and he was struggling a little bit with file and folder organization, not only on his own machine, but also then on the server. And that's not unusual. So why do I have an assignment really early in the course that has you set up files and folders? And the reason is because file management, when you do web work, becomes absolutely critical in terms of having your web pages work correctly and being able to find the right stuff. So where you typically will start is making sure that the stuff on your own machine is in order. Now, even though you can do some file management by managing files within FileZilla here, so for example, I could like make a directory or rename a file. I can do that stuff here. That's doable. I would strongly suggest that you prefer to do that in a separate instance and using the local file system that you have on your machine. And in this case, what I do is I load stuff up on my Google Drive and then put it in the correctly named folders on my machine. Right? So that's one approach. So everything I've done this fall for this class is in this 2022 fall folder inside web programming on my drive. Right? And granted, I have a more complicated file structure than you guys do because I'm doing a bunch of different things. What I do recommend, and this is really kind of a hard one to learn, is if you're struggling with getting the files right on both sides of FileZilla, like on both the left side and the right side, what I might recommend to you is a strategy that I've used in the past, and I'm trying to figure out where my folder is. Okay, so I wasn't scrolled all the way up, but you notice way up here at the top I have a folder named Apollo Utility Accounts, because guess what, I have more than one of them, right? So I have an A account, a B account, and a C account. And for all of you who are looking at the case study solutions for this class, right, the URL is actually on our old server, Apollo. I just didn't want to recreate it on the new server. It's all on my C account, so you can see my username there. And I want you to notice this is at the root of my C account. So this is at the bottommost folder. I have an index file that contains all of this information. And what does it contain? Basically, all the case studies and all the resources that you need for the 10th edition of the book. So this is my launch page on Apollo. Some people might call this a home page, and I think that's fine if you want to call it a home page. I call it a launch page because I think of it as more of kind of like an index to all the work that I have on Apollo. If I connect up to Apollo, and I'm just going to do that really quick here, just to show you what that folder looks like, and also to show you that what you're connecting to is kind of irrelevant in terms of what machine you're on. So it doesn't matter which server you're using, basically. So here is my A account on Apollo, and I want you to notice kind of like all the stuff that I have in here. Right in the root folder, I have an index page. This index page that's highlighted right now is the one that creates all of this. Then you will notice that all my files and folders, instead of for example, being like Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, I have a little bit longer view on this, and you guys need to switch yourselves to this longer view at this point. And that is, I created folders for each one of the classes that I was teaching in my case, or taking in your case. So separate folders for each thing, and then putting inside that folder each of the unit folders. And then if you start digging in, you'll notice all the case studies or individual assignments that are named. And so what I have here, folks, is kind of like this complete hierarchy, if you will, of folders and files organized by course inside here. So part of it becomes file management once again. Now, you can have completely different file structures on your local machine and then completely different file structures on the remote server. However, and here's the big however, you really have to kind of be on top of it and know what's going where, right? What is a lot easier, and what I came to as a conclusion that works for myself when and I did this when I was much younger, you know, because I was always confused about why is it different and why can't I find it. So I created on Apollo, and this is in the C account. Now this isn't an exact mirror copy because I've added stuff, but what I did start doing is I started replicating folder structures. So in an ideal world, everything that was in this folder on my computer is exact same thing that's on the folder on the server, set up exactly the same way. So you might have a folder called Prometheus, and then have a folder called Web Programming, and then all your unit folders, and then all your case studies and individual assignments, right? And the ideal would be that you kind of match those up, right? Up to you how you want to really proceed with that. But I see this as a really big problem for a lot of people, is keeping those files organized. So I would suggest really strongly that whatever you do on Apollo or Prometheus, you have the exact mirror copy on your local file system, right? So think about that. And what I do suggest real strongly, like right now, if your folders were set up and they were maybe the root of your Prometheus account looks like this, that's fine for now, but wouldn't it make a whole lot more sense to set up a web programming folder? This one's called Web 1 because that used to be the old name for it. And then I have a Web 2 and whatever. But you know, in upcoming semesters, you're going to have you have web programming, advanced web programming, JavaScript, and then the courses start coming like PHP, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to have like course after course, each with its own unit folders, each with its own web page assignments, all of which get uploaded. I thought what might be kind of neat for you to look at is a student's launch page. And here's one that's kind of interesting because this person here, this is Erin Burgess, who used to be a web student. She's now long graduated, but after she graduated, she did come back to Gateway and work as a tutor, and I think she's still a tutor, actually. And so like if you go to the Learning Success Center and either online or in person and sign up to meet with an IT tutor, there's a good chance you might cross paths with Erin. Now you notice what Erin did with her launch page is what she would do, and this is like her own style now, is she has all of her web classes. So here, for example, is her Web Programming 1, and you know, so Jam, you guys, anybody who's doing Java Jam and Fish Creek, so she kind of did both. But all of her stuff is linked up here. So I want you to notice as I hover over these links, watch the bottom corner of the screen here, and notice how each one of these things is in its own unique folder. And if you're really looking at that URL carefully in the bottom corner, I know it's probably kind of small and hard to see, you'll notice how she has a class folder, and then she has the case study with the chapter number all attached inside that same setup. So in other words, every one of these links on this page has its own unique folder on the server. And so this is the JavaScript class. Yeah, lots of assignments in the JavaScript class. And she has those all organized chapter by chapter on the server. So what I want you to kind of take a look at this, right? So as you go through here, she's got all the different classes she took, all the major assignments. They're all linked up here, class by class, you know, chapter by chapter. And so when she's all done with her degree, she has an instant portfolio. All she has to do is share this link with somebody. Hey, look, this is all the stuff I did in school. And I want you to think about that carefully, because that could be valuable. It's a whole lot better than the 3-inch binder that I have sitting here under my desk with diskettes and envelopes. But it is part of portfolio building. and more importantly, it's also organizing it for you. So like, you don't ever want to be in the situation where it's like, hey, this is just like that thing I did in my JavaScript class last semester. Where's that file? Damn it, I can't find it. Right. So if that sounds like you, this is a really great idea. Let's take a really quick look at how you put one of these together. So if I look at Erin's page, I can right click and view source, and then I want you to notice how she did this. She just created basically a bunch of list items. You know, there's some problems actually with the code here, but you know what, it still works on the page. So she just created all this stuff. So every time she would upload something, she would also go through the process of adding a link to what she uploaded to this page. And then, you know, once the page is set up, you're just adding a link each week, right? So there's not really a lot of stuff to do on a weekly basis once it's set up. If you look at my version of the launch page, so this is once again on the Apollo server, same difference though. I didn't even bother to do any CSS. Erin went to the trouble of actually making hers kind of look good. She put in a background and she changed the font, you know, all those things. I just did basic HTML. So if you wanted to look at my launch page, well, folks, just right click, view page source, and here's how I did mine. Not too dissimilar, really. I did end up putting everything into a table, which is kind of what gives me the 3 columns. I didn't want people to scroll, basically. I just want just a little bit of scrolling. Everything's almost on one screen here. In fact, I'm probably zoomed in. See, I am. And it almost all fits on one screen without zooming in. And that was kind of part of my design. But the code itself is really pretty simple. In fact, I used unordered lists and bullets because it just made sense to me to do it that way. You don't even have to do it that way. You can just create, for example, a heading and then just, you know, paragraphs if you want with links. If you look at the anatomy of my links, this is kind of telling also. First of all, I am linking between servers. So like all the new stuff, the House of the Dragon stuff I've been doing this semester is actually all on the Prometheus server. While all the older stuff and the case studies, so like my old personal projects and then the case studies are all in separate folders. So all the case studies are in a folder called Web1 Case Study, and then by the name of the case study, the chapter, and then pointing to the index file. And that goes unit by unit, folder by folder, and everything is in its own discrete folder. Every separate assignment is in its own separate folder. So if I did chapter 2 Java Jam, that's in its own folder, and then when I did chapter 3, that's its own folder. So we also have a complete version history here as well. So really what we're doing is we're setting up kind of all the folders, and then the launch page really becomes kind of like the index and link to all of that work. All right, so how do we get this set up? Well, the first thing that you do is you're going to look at the folder structure that you already have locally on your own machine. And for me, for this semester in web programming, like I said, everything is inside this folder. All right, so I'm going to go through the process here of first doing my file and folder management. Locally, I'm already good, right? Everything's, I know where it is. I know what's in each folder. It's all set up. So like if I open up, let's say unit 5, I'm going to see my personal project, and then I'm also going to see my case study. Now, of course, I haven't been doing case studies because they're already kind of done, but the folder's there, right? So if I did work on it, that's where I would put my stuff. All right, so now I got to link this all up and get it over to Prometheus. All right, so this is where we pull out FileZilla. You do want to get logged into your account on Prometheus, and then on the left side of the screen here, put yourself in the spot where you want to be relative to what should be on Prometheus. And hopefully you're catching my drift here. In this case, on Prometheus, that's the right side of the screen here, I set up a folder for web programming. And if currently it's not set up like this, let's say your unit folders are just down here in the root, I would suggest just right click, create a folder. Now I already have web programming, but you know what? There's going to be an advanced web programming too. So I'll just set up a folder for that. So advanced web prog. That's my naming convention, all lowercase, easy for me to remember. All right, so there it is. Then what I would do is if I had a bunch of individual folders here, and I'm just going to create one for example, so like unit 1, right? I can then take that and just drag it in there, and now it's inside there, right? So that's how you can organize it pretty quickly and easy. It's pretty intuitive, honestly. So since I'm working on web programming right now, I'm going to go in there and see what I have. Oh, I see I have unit 2, 3, and 4, but I don't have unit 5 yet. So what I'm going to do is I'll pull unit 5 over, right? And there it is. And you can see in the bottom here, this bottom panel, what it does is whenever you do a transfer, it shows you the transfer of the files and their progress. It goes pretty fast on high-speed connections, but if you have a lot of files or a lot of big files, it can take a little while. So now this is uploaded, and not to be paranoid, but I'm going to look inside the folders and make sure my stuff actually got there. Right? The other thing is it also helps me build the URL, right? So this little thing here shows me the folder structure on the server, which for static pages is also the URL. In other words, I'm going to correct that, a portion of the URL. So I'm just going to copy this. Now I'm going to go to my browser and see if it actually works. Right? And this might seem backwards to you because I'm not creating my launch page until I verify this works. And that's not even the right account, is it, folks? It's my A account. And then I'm going to paste in that link. Now you got to be careful when you paste in that link from the FTP that you don't have 2 slashes here. And I think we were running into that the other day, Vidal, when we were working. Make sure you don't have 2 slashes there. I'm just going to press enter, and there's my work from last week. So it's working just fine, which is wonderful. Now the thing I have to do is create the launch page that's going to control all of this. And right now, I don't know if I actually have a launch page yet. In fact, I'm going to go to the root of my personal account. Right, so this is my URL on Prometheus with just the account name added to it. Now, if I have an index page there, it will load up. Now, for a lot of us, it'll be this. So this will be that first FTP assignment that we did. Now, this is kind of a superfluous assignment, really. It doesn't really have any weight or meaning, so you can go ahead and delete this from the server because it's been long graded. So we're going to delete that file. So if I look at FileZilla, that file that I loaded up, I'm going to go to the root of the account. So I'm going to come up to this top part, and this / shows you the root of your account. And then that's that index file that we're working with. And I'm going to just right-click and delete. If you don't want to delete it, I'm just putting this out there, you might want to rename it. You could say something like simple FTP or something like that if you don't want to get rid of it. But now you'll notice if I go back to the server, wherever I find that, where is my... All right, I'm just going to open up a new tab then. So back to Prometheus, back to my account. Now, this is kind of weird because I renamed it, but it's still loading up. Control-Shift-R in these cases. All right, this is what I should see. It says you don't have permission to access this resource, and really what it's trying to do is it's looking for the index page, index.html. Right, it's just not finding it. So now we have to create one and add it. So now the first thing that I strongly suggest is if you're going to do that, right here on a local level, so here where I'm doing all my work, normally I would have my file, so I want you to notice here I call it Fall 2022, but on the server I call it web programming. So I have a difference in naming conventions already. In addition, my launch page would be one folder level up, and this would be kind of like a weird place to put a launch page, real frankly. So what you might want to do is you might want to mimic what I've done, which is to use that like a separate folder altogether to house this stuff. And you notice how I have Apollo utility accounts. And now I've created a folder called Prometheus utility accounts, and I have created my A account, which does actually looks really close to what I have here, right? So this is a more accurate translation. Now, granted, I added this superfluously just to do a demonstration, so I'm going to get rid of it. I do have an implementation of WordPress running on the server. I do not want to delete that because it's for my capstone project class. But normally, you know, whatever's on one side would be on the other side. So you might want to actually create a separate folder called Prometheus. And then in that folder, now I have multiple accounts, but you would just have one. I would put in there exactly the same thing on both sides. So I would take all my web programming stuff, put it in here folder by folder. Now you notice I don't have that. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of sync up here. So I'm going to grab all of these folders and I'm going to copy them. So here's my copy. And then I'm going to find that utility folder that I created. I'm going to go inside of web programming because this is the class that I'm working with. And I'm actually going to delete that folder, right? I'm going to paste it back in anyhow. And now I'm going to paste. So all of those folders are coming over. Now, I want to make sure that it's still working, by the way. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to like speculate, I guess, on names. It's not good to speculate, honestly. Let's actually refresh this side to see those folders. These should be identical at this point, but I can't really be sure. And however goofy it is, you know, and you see like differences already. Ideally, these files are the same on both sides, you know. And you can see mine are not quite exactly because I'm always in the situation where I'm doing examples. But let's just say Unit 5 should be pretty close to being identical, right? House of the Dragon, House of the Dragon, and you see how they're like perfectly matched up, you know, the same files and folders. And then if you want to get down to it, you can also look at like the file sizes to make sure they're all matched up. And that's usually a pretty good indicator because all the file sizes are identical. Unfortunately, the dates on the files aren't always going to match up, and the reason is the dates on the server will be the dates that you uploaded it, and then the dates here would be the last time you saved it. Sometimes those are in sync, sometimes they're not. You can add columns here, and I think this is kind of interesting. And actually I don't know, I guess you can't. So we have all the visible columns. So that last modified column can be pretty useful. On the server side, you can actually add these other two columns called permissions and owner and group, and we won't cover that right now, but that has to do with how the file system allows access to the files and who owns them. All right, so now that we're all synced up, let's make sure that we start creating in the root of our account. And so here I'm going to go back up. So this is the root of my Prometheus account on my local side, and this is the root of my Prometheus account on the remote side. What I'm going to do here, and I want you basically to ignore the fact that I have these three files, is I'm going to build an index file in the root that is going to then be copied over, that will always have all the links to everything. So I'm going to use Dreamweaver to do my work, and I do this for a number of different reasons. But one of the reasons is Dreamweaver kind of, whenever you're working on a website, kind of forces you to work in what we call kind of like a folder or project setup, you know. So in other words, we do what we call site definitions. Now, if you're working in like Visual Studio Code, or if you're working in Notepad++, the folder management in some cases becomes independent of the product. Visual Studio Code's a little bit better at it. Notepad++ not so much. But what you want to do basically is make sure that you're working with all the stuff in a relative way. So meaning that you're in the correct folder relative to your project. In Dreamweaver, we use what we call site definitions, and I kind of went through this a while ago, but basically I did create a site definition for web programming for fall of 2022, and here's my folder, right? So it's already designated, but you know what? I just changed things, right? I'm putting it in my utility account, so I'm going to point this to my utility account. So that's where I'm going to go with this, and then I'm going to probably stick with that for the rest of the semester here. So I'm going to just climb back up, find that spot, and then for this particular class for the semester, it's here, right? So that's the folder. I'm going to select that folder and click Save. All right. All right, so here on the sidebar, I get to see that structure, and I want you to notice the folders that are present here, right? And if you want to be persnickety, you can go in there and just make sure everything's there, right? Right, so you can take a look inside the folders, but it looks like everything's there. Right, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to close all the open files I have here, and then I notice that I have an index file already created here in the root, and I want to open that up at the moment. I just want to see what's in it because I may have started. Okay, so this is just my generic FTP thing. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to close it. I'm just going to delete it. Right, so I'm just going to get rid of that because it's not really needed. All right. But what I do want to do is I want to create a new file in the root of the folder. So in other words, if you're doing it from your file system, I would create it here, right? So if you want to do right-click, new index.html or text document, whatever, you can do it that way, right? I'm going to do it from inside Dreamweaver, so I'm going to say new file. You can see it just drops it in there, and I want to call it index.html. All right. Now I'm going to double-click and open that in the editor, and you can see I just have a blank HTML document. Now my goal is to link up all this stuff that I've already created to this document. Now, inside the body section, I'm going to put all my content, but I suppose I should probably title it. So I'm going to probably say Ties Launch Page. All right, so that's the title. And then, you know, I want to have it kind of look okay, so I'm just going to create a heading. I'm going to do a heading level 2, and I'm going to say same thing, Ties Launch Page. And if you want, you could say Prometheus. And then I want to organize my content. So like I have a couple different thoughts on this. I can organize my content in a number of different ways. What makes sense to me though is to kind of do a listing for a class and then do a listing for the unit and then links to the stuff. That to me makes a lot of sense. But if I'm going to do, actually I'm thinking I'm going to change my mind here. Let's make this an H1. And then I could put in an H2, and the H2 could be the course title. So this would be Web Programming. And if you want, you could even take it a little further and just say Fall 2022. And yeah, there's a G in there. Right. Then I want to add the stuff, right? So now, Unit 1 doesn't really have anything to turn in except for that simple FTP assignment, and we already kind of determined not important. But we might have, for example, let's do an H3 here, and we'll say Unit 2. And then inside Unit 2, I might create a bullet list. And this is really highly subjective. If you want to do it as a bullet list, do it. If you want to do it some other way, do that. It doesn't really matter too much. I could just as easily just do a paragraph, and I could say something to the effect of like, what's the link going to say? Well, what do we do in Unit 2? We did HTML Basics and we did Java Jam. So I could do HTML basics, right? But I want to make that a link, right? So if I make that a link, I would go like this, a href equals, and why it's kind of fun to use a tool like this is because I can use the built-in tools to help me link directly to the file. See how easy that was, right? But otherwise you have to build this manually. The link name, of course, should go inside. So there's a link to HTML basics. If I had a Java Jam thing, I don't, but if I did, I would just basically copy all of this and then I would just link up, and we're doing this hypothetically here because I don't actually have a Java Jam, and I've named the folder Java Jam, and then we'll assume there's an index file. All right, let's just save this really quick. So I'm doing a Control S, and I'm going to go to the live view here. Now you could preview in your browser, but here's an example of what it looks like. Well, I see one mistake already. So this one, right, would take me to that page, and well, this has the same name, so there's a issue with the code right there. I needed to change this, and I should have said Java Jam, and then maybe chapter 2. So I know which version I'm looking at. Let's save that. Let's go back, and so now I have this look. Now, whether you like this look or not, maybe you like bullets better, or whatever works for you. Just get it on the page is really kind of what it comes down to. All right, so if I keep this process going, and I follow the same pattern, I would do an H3 for unit 3, and then you know what, these URLs are going to be basically kind of the same, right? I mean, they're not going to be that much different, except in unit 3 I called it HTML basics, but this is where I started building House of the Dragon, actually. So I'm going to rename it and say House of the Dragon. And this is in unit 3, so I'll just know, so I won't have to like add anything to that, and then I can save it. All right, so here's what happens now. Once you get building this, you got to start testing it. I want you to notice the URLs here. All the URLs are relative to where the files are located on my local machine. So this is a really important takeaway. So if I actually go to look at this in a browser, and I can do that a couple different ways. I can come back down here, right, and I can just double click and open. So this is, I want you to notice, this is on my local machine, right? I'm not looking at it on Prometheus. This is on my file system. If I set it up correctly, I should be able to go to each assignment and go back. Okay, Java Jam is empty, so it's going to give me, there's nothing there, but assuming that I did have it. And then here is House of the Dragon. It's still looking kind of basic at that point. But you notice how it works even on my own local machine. Now what I can do at that point is I can come here and refresh. Notice this is 1024, 1257. Yeah, that's the right timestamp. I'm going to drag this over. And so there it is on the server, and now I can take a look. So if I look on Prometheus under my A account, I don't have to add anything additional to that. It's going to bring up my index page. There it is. And if the stuff's all in the right place on the server, which it should be, I should be able to go to the same pages, right? Java Jam won't work. House of the Dragon will, right? So that's kind of the idea. And what you do is you keep building up all of your links. The process of doing it really isn't that difficult. Once you see how it works, it's just a matter of kind of keeping on building. If you prefer a different layout here, for example, like I don't have any of the actual case studies here, but I do have all the House of the Dragons. And so it wouldn't be that hard for me to just do some really basic copy pasting to build this up. So there's 2 more units. So I might have like a unit 4 and a unit 5, right? And because I know what my naming conventions are, and I think this is kind of interesting, right? So here I screwed it up. So unit 3, this should say 3. This should say 4. And then this should say 5. Except here the names are changed. So notice that in unit 3 it was still HTML basics, but here it's House of the Dragon, House of the Dragon. So this piece needs to change. And I want you to notice, this is kind of the neat thing about using a more powerful tool, is the moment you start like correcting something, it helps you. But I know how I name things, so I wouldn't have to guess much at this. So let's save this. Let's look at it locally first. All right, so I'm going to actually do a refresh on this screen. So notice how the timestamp changed. I'm going to open this. And so here's House of the Dragon. Let's try that unit 3 again. All right, yeah, so it is different. Pretty different. Unit 4, and then unit 5. Right, all like different versions. You can also hover, right, and look at the bottom left corner of the screen and see the different links and as they change. Once again, I'm going to go to FileZilla. I'm going to re-upload this. I always like to refresh to see the timestamp change, and then I'm going to move it over. And now it's going to ask me to overwrite, which is what we want to do. That means it'll delete the existing file and then replace it with the current one. And then we can go back to our browser. Once again, let's make sure we're on Prometheus. Refresh. There's the additional links. Let's try Unit 2, Unit 3. Oh, okay, well that one's not working, so we'll have to fix that one. Unit 4, that's not working, and Unit 5. Okay, Unit 5's working. So what does that tell me? It tells me that Unit 3 and 4 are not uploaded correctly, right? That's the assumption here. So let's go back to FileZilla and take a look, right? Because this is exactly the kind of thing that will happen to you guys. Is Unit, oh yeah, so it's missing, right? So it's missing there. Unit 4 is also missing it. All right, so why don't we do this? Let's delete Units 3 and 4 from here. And then on this side, there's my HTML basics. This is Unit 3. So I'm going to move Unit 3 over. You go back up a folder, check Unit 4. Okay, so that all seems to be there. Let me move these 2 unit folders over. So now I have Units 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I want you to notice I'm still in the utility account folder. Now let's go back to the browser and see if that fixed things. Notice I don't have to update the launch page because we're assuming that's correct already. All right, so we're going to refresh. Unit 3, okay, now it's working. Unit 4, now it's working. And Unit 5. Right. So, folks, this is basically the anatomy of doing a launch page. And I'm hoping you see the value of it. So it gets you to organize your files locally, and then you're organizing your files remotely, and then you're creating a page here that, albeit does look really basic right now, but eventually, becomes really a portfolio link page. Like an example of all your work that's on the server. Now you can do a whole bunch of stuff to kind of make this look better. If you want to CSS it, you want to give it colors and backgrounds and fonts and whatever, that's on you, right? I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for just a really basic page like this. I think, my Apollo launch page where all the solutions to the case studies are is a really good example, of what a more completed one looks like. And then I think when we looked at Aaron's work, wherever that was. So let me see if I can pull that up again. Here's an example of her work where everything is all linked up. And you can tell she's got a little bit of CSS on it. and look at all the stuff that she has on here, right? So she has like, got every assignment from just about every class that required her to upload it to the server, right? So think of the value of that, because it's still there. She's already graduated, but whenever she's out looking for work, she can say, hey, check out what I did at school, right? And might be impressive, it might not be that impressive, but it still shows that you did it, and that's of value, frankly. And then you don't have to walk around with a 3-inch printed portfolio like what I had to do. All right, folks, I'm going to stop this recording here.